Great. Thanks, Carla. My name is Liv Dietrich. I work for the Institute for Broadening Participation, or IBP for short. We are a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to increase diversity in the sciences. And this webinar is going to be on how to make the most of your graduate program. And as you'll see, the theme of today's webinar will be kind of creating a game plan. Our goal here today is to ensure that you leave the webinar with some tools that allow you to create your own personal game plan and that will help you achieve a successful graduate experience. So we're going to cover some topics such as how to develop your mentor network, how to develop an individual development plan, and where to find some additional resources. We have 3 guest speakers in addition to myself. So the next thing I'm going to do is share my desktop. You may see just a slight delay, but in a second here, you should see a graphic that appears on your screen. And this graphic is called a concept map. We're going to use a concept map to march through some of the presentation today. And we will send you a link to this online concept map at the end of the webinar, probably tomorrow. And one thing to note is each concept, so each shape on the map, has associated resources. So for example, I'm hovering my mouse over 2 icons next to this concept. There are some photos and there are some documents. And throughout this concept map, there are associated resources. So I encourage you to explore those when you get a link to the map. So we're going to start off talking about mentoring, and to do that, we have IBP's Executive Director, Ashanti Johnson. She is also the Assistant Vice Provost for Faculty Recruitment for the University of Texas Arlington's Division of Faculty Affairs. So Ashanti?
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Liv and David and Carla. So mentoring is a very important topic, and it's important to your professional development and your success as a professional. The most successful student actively cultivate relationships with multiple mentors, including both faculty level, near-peer mentors, and other professionals outside their institution. So while not everyone makes for a good mentor, successful students spend time seeking out good mentoring and good advice. So what I'd like to do to give you an idea is to pause and tell you a little bit about my story. And I, in addition to being Assistant Vice Provost for Faculty Recruitment, I have a doctorate in oceanography, and I'm a professor of environmental science. I pursued that track, environmental science, ocean sciences, since I was a young girl. 3rd grade, I decided that's what I was going to do. Throughout my life, there were teachers at K through 12 levels who encouraged that, although they weren't in that area. So they mentored me in the sense of encouragement and trying to connect me with individuals, although they couldn't speak to the specific topic. When I reached undergrad level, first time I was able to really engage with professionals in the field, again, I was able to articulate my desires, and I had really supportive professors at the undergrad level at Texas A&M Galveston. So one of my first, I'd say, official mentors was a female chemistry professor who I went on to do an intern, to work in her lab, as well as become a tutor. And so I expressed to her what it was I was interested in, and so she began to provide opportunities or connect me with others. In addition to that, you know, I mentioned the term near-peer mentoring. There were upperclassmen who encouraged me to look beyond the academic experiences. So with that, I was able to kind of round myself out by pursuing leadership activities on campus. Student body president, Board of Regents member for students, that type of thing in the A&M system, which then positioned me to be able to speak, communicate effectively with broad audiences, which I can tell you was a very intimidating experience, as well as allowed me to have a broader circle of individuals to be able to network with and call upon at various times. And in fact, just quickly with that, as a student body president at undergrad, I was on the search committee for the Dean of Geosciences at A&M. And so interviewed a bunch of people, and the one who was successful in obtaining the position was Bob Deuce. Later on in life, when I went into grad school, I took a different path. I got off of oceanography and decided I was going to be a chemical engineering major based on my organic chemistry internship experiences at Texas Instruments, again, which came by mentoring relationships. I didn't like chemical engineering. Sorry about if there are any chemical engineers on the phone. Missed the ocean. And so when I was at A&M with a full fellowship to be there in grad school in the wrong college, the wrong area, I reached out to Bob Deuce, who had been a mentor, and said, I really want to come home, back to geosciences. So he connected me with the department head. I was able to apply to get back in, and he wound up serving on my committee as well as writing letters of support after I received my PhD for some of my first positions. So cultivating mentors that you might not even activate for several years is very important. So I wanted to then let you know that I call myself a mentor collector, and one of my mentors, who's won a Presidential Mentoring Award himself, told me the proper term for that is I have a composite mentor. So different people speak to you at different phases of your life. So my chemistry teacher, who, reminded she was a short female like myself, she was in a field that there weren't very many women, was able to speak to me and encourage me. Bob Deuce at a particular time was able to really support my efforts to transition back into the ocean sciences. When I was postdocing, there was Ellery Engel, a professor at Georgia Tech, who was a white male who was very instrumental in guiding me and kind of coaching me through the my first academic position negotiation process. So my message I want to give to you is to really embrace the idea that there will be various people who speak into your life. Not those individuals don't have to be a cookie cutter image of yourself having the same experience. In fact, there'll be a lot of them will be very different, which allows you to hear a different perspective. And the one other thing, one of the things that I mentioned during that short presentation is that I would tell individuals what it is my goals were, what I wanted to do. So I had an opportunity to reach out to them so they could get to understand my goals and team up with me to achieve them. So when you go into grad school beyond, you'll need to cultivate letters of reference. And I'll give you a quick tip of what worked well for me and having my mentors being effective with those letters of reference is I sought out my professors who taught the key courses that I was enrolled in. And I went to their office hours. And those office hours are not necessarily if you're having problems with a topic. I went to office hours to say, hey, I was really interested in this that you expressed today, and this, I think, ties into my goals, and this is what I'd like to do. Can you give me your thoughts on this or any guidance on how I should look more and find out more about it? So that's a real natural icebreaker in case you guys are trying to figure out how to approach someone, and it allows them to know you more than just a grade, what percentile you were in their course. So I encourage you to definitely access the faculty during office hours. I can tell you that as a professor of environmental science, even this summer I'm teaching 2 courses. There's not been a student to come to my office hours. And so it's time that we devote for students that are often underutilized, so I encourage you to take advantage of those. Now, so there are several places that you can look to develop formal and informal mentoring relationships. And I mentioned on your home campus, if you're able to go to conferences, that's wonderful. Obviously, I mentioned internships, research experiences, and that's another area where you're able to cultivate mentors that are senior to you as well as near-peer mentors. These are the scientists or students who might be one step ahead of you but could become your colleagues later on. So some programs that you might apply to will be open to all enrollees at the institution, like me working in Melanie Lesko's lab at chemistry. And so you want to start to investigate those as an undergraduate. Then there are national programs that provide a lot of professional development mentoring opportunities, one of which is one that we started in 2003, which is MS-PhDs, a mentoring program for Earth System Sciences that's hosted by IBP. There's another, the one that's fantastic, which is mentornet.org, and it's online mentoring program. So you're able to engage with various professionals in different fields for a finite amount of time. And so look at the details, look at the resources, because there are many individuals who want to give back to the next generation of STEM professionals. To give you some ideas of some campus-wide programs that have been very successful in mentoring efforts, there's the Meyerhoff Graduate Fellows Program, which involves a fellowship as well as mentoring support. AGAP programs throughout the country, which is Alliance for Graduate Education to the Professoriate, as well as others, including the Sloan Foundation. You also, whether you're assigned mentors for the Minority PhD program, as well as LSAMP Bridge to a Doctorate programs. Large alliances, sometimes, such as AGAP, does not provide a large amount of funding, but they do emphasize the mentoring professional development support for students in STEM. So I encourage you to become actively engaged in those. And finally, you may want to cultivate informal mentoring networks and social support structures. These can include those students that you have in your study groups, your family, and for me in my graduate school experience, church family was extremely vital and helped me get over those hurdles as a grad student in STEM, as well as campus or regional chapters of professional organizations and cultural organizations. So I was president of the Black Grad Student Association at Texas A&M. I was part of the Graduate Student Association at Texas A&M. I was part of the Oceanography Graduate Council at Texas A&M. So be active in joining organizations, but be wise in how you utilize your time. I was not actively engaged every week in those three organizations. I was able to pick and choose what activities that I could take on at the same time addressing my academic work, my research work, as well as having some personal time. So now I'm going to pass it back to Liz to discuss career planning.
Thanks, Ashanti. So, we'll move on to talk a little bit about deliberate career planning and also the Individual Development Plan, or IDP for short, which is a structured planning tool designed to help you identify some long-term career goals and to make a plan for improving your skill set and help you facilitate productive conversations with those mentors that you're cultivating about your career planning and development. This is a living, breathing document that you keep up to date on a regular basis throughout your graduate career, and with guidance from your all of the mentors that you are collecting, as Ashanti said. So you may be asking, okay, well, why do I need to consider this level of career planning? And the answer is that it really is essential for our current job climate. The number of tenure-track positions in academia is declining, and there is kind of a documented problem with postdoctoral researchers becoming stuck in the quote-unquote perpetual postdoc position, unable to move on to more advanced positions. And you can avoid these pitfalls by doing some career planning. And in fact, research has documented the importance of career planning. It shows that career planning can lead to greater success, both in terms of income and promotions, as well as career satisfaction. And this document in particular, this IDP that you developed, can really help you keep your eyes on your goals, facilitate discussion and interaction with your mentors, and assist you in planning for how you are going to continue your skills development and your professional training, especially in those kind of soft skills areas that your academic program may not necessarily focus on, things like networking and project management. And it can also be really helpful in preparing you for a non-traditional career path or careers in industry. These are career topics that you may not hear about as much in your department or on campus, but the IDP can really help you initiate discussions about those career paths and move along to those. The AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, has an online IDP. And now you don't have to necessarily choose that format, but it's nicely done, I think, their website. And so I wanted to give you a little tour of it so that you can see what it looks like. And so this is my account. I've logged in and kind of started an IDP. And what it'll do when you log in, first it will ask you a bunch of questions about your skills, your interests, and your values. As an example, here are some of the information that I provided about my skill set. And it collects that information, and then it gives you some career path suggestions. In my case, it has suggested science writing and science policy as things that I might be interested in. You can do some research about these career paths. For example, if I want to read more about science writing, there are some articles I can read, some books I can read. There are some professional societies that I could consider joining, or I might want to attend one of their conferences, or there might be chapters on campus that I want to get involved with. So it's really nice, this set of resources. There are prompters for you to enter information about events and workshops you attend, people that you might be conducting informal interviews with about career paths. You can create kind of a career plan with sort of career plan A and career plan B, set some goals for yourself, near term and long term, and then there's a space for you to enter some information about your mentoring team. And you can print this entire IDP, or you can print a section of it and take it with you to office hours, for example, to talk about different components of this IDP with your mentors. So it's pretty good. So I would encourage you to explore it, even if you don't, in the end, choose to use this website. It's a nice way to get familiar with what an IDP is and how it works. So going back to our concept map here, let me make the screen a little bigger. There's some other things that that we think you might want to consider focusing on, whatever format you choose for your IDP. One of these is products and soft skills. So by products, I'm mostly talking about publications. It's becoming increasingly important for graduate students to publish peer-reviewed articles while you're still in graduate school. These are articles that you'll probably publish along with other graduate students and your faculty advisors. But poster presentations really just aren't sufficient. You really want to have a couple publications under your belt before you are graduated. And then by soft skills, I'm referring to skills like networking, project management, teamwork, and collaborative research skills. And these are skills that are not often taught as part of your doctoral program and coursework, but they are really important for your success in your career after graduation. In particular, networking is really important in landing a postdoc position or that first job. And collaborative and team-based research skills are increasingly important. These days, the majority of funded research in many of the disciplines is collaborative in nature, meaning it's not just a single faculty member submitting a grant and working solo on a funded project. Projects are generally led by a team of individuals. And so looking for some soft skill training opportunities is great. Things like certificate programs, boot camps, short courses, workshops offered by your home campus, as well as professional societies, and possibly some of the formal mentoring programs that Ashanti mentioned, like the AGEP alliances. Those are places to look. Your mentors, your fellow graduate students, your career services office, even that AAAS IDP website are all great places to start searching for some opportunities to improve your soft skills. The other thing to mention is the importance of preparing yourself to successfully receive funding for your research when you move on from your graduate career to a postdoc position or a faculty position. You'll want to review funding forecast reports now to get a sense for the areas which funders are focusing on. So some things you could look for are the strategic plans put out by some of the federal agencies like National Science Foundation, NASA, and others. Battelle.org releases a global R&D funding forecast report, and AAAS, again, will have some valuable resources, as well as the National Academies Press. So again, check with your mentor network to get an idea of the relevant reports and funders within your specific area of research. And once you have a sense for those funding trends, think about how your research fits into that funding big picture. Is it possible to add a component or refine your research so that it's particularly attractive? Alternately, can you consider obtaining an internship in an area of funding interest to help kind of boost your experience in that area? So as you map out your funding plans for yourself, just consider those sources of funding and how you will be funding your postdoctoral fellowship and maybe getting a few small collaborative grants. So if you start by networking and doing the research now while you're still in graduate school, you'll give yourself a higher likelihood of success later on. Before I pass it off to our other presenters, I want to touch on a couple other resources. I'm not going to go in depth because we have other webinars on these topics, but I want to highlight this information for you. So in terms of graduate funding, I think you probably know this, but I want to emphasize that as a STEM student, science, technology, engineering, math, you really should not have to incur debt to obtain an advanced degree. Most STEM students are fully funded at the graduate level, and the type of funding that you receive can help you in your career development for sure. Just as an example, if you are intent on a teaching career, you should definitely be considering trying to obtain a teaching assistantship during your graduate program. There are many other tips on funding your graduate education that you can find. We have several handouts attached to this concept here. And we also have a webinar, a video of a webinar that we've done on the topic. And that's linked here in this concept as well and available on our website, pathwaystoscience.org, in the resource library. Similarly, we have a webinar video and several handouts aimed at helping you prepare for a postdoc position. And while you may think it's kind of early to be thinking ahead for that, really the networking and groundwork that you lay as a graduate student is what helps you move successfully into a postdoc position. It is never too early to start networking and laying the foundation for that. So I encourage you to explore both of these resources. So now I'm going to pass it off to our first guest speaker, Dr. Idella Yambin, who is the new IDEA Concierge and the Program Manager of IDEA Advanced Seed Fund and the Center for Technology Commercialization at the University of Wisconsin Extension. And Idella, I'm just going to bring up your presentation here.
Okay, well, I'll just give you kind of the verbal cue for the next slide, if that's okay.
That works great.
Great. Okay, well, first let me say a big thank you for having me as a panelist today. I think these sessions are so very important. When I was a graduate student thinking about careers, especially careers outside of academia, there were examples, but it was something I had to seek out. So the more that we're able to talk about different opportunities and pathways, I think the better we are able to take advantage of the great opportunity of getting an advanced degree in your scientific area. So I'll just start off by saying when I was a graduate student, and I guess even before that, when I was an undergraduate student thinking about my own career trajectory, I thought of it as a very kind of linear, or I should say stepwise approach. You might hear a lot about the academic ladder, where you do research as a graduate student, you go off and get a postdoc, then you go off and somehow get a tenure-track position, and then somehow your life is great. Like that's how I thought my career progression would be. So next slide, please. So in actuality, that's not at all how my career trajectory has turned out so far. So if you start on the far left area where I have biology, and that's kind of where I started with my career. I knew that I was interested in biology as a very, very early age. I remember getting microscope sets and things like that for my birthdays and Christmases and things like that. And I went off to a math and science school in the state that I grew up in, and had my first experience doing academic research with the medical college there, and really enjoyed what I did. And when I went off to undergrad, I joined the lab about 2 weeks into my schooling there as a freshman, and worked in that same lab for all 4 years, and even through the summertime. And after that, I again I loved biology, and at that point I had narrowed my focus to developmental biology, and I had wanted to explore what developmental biology looked like in a different organism. So I worked in plants, and then I moved to C. elegans, and I went to a completely different college and worked there for a year as a technician, but I knew that I wanted to go to graduate school. Part of the reason I knew that is because well, I should back up a second and tell the story of I didn't actually know what a PhD was when I joined a lab. I didn't know what it took to get a PhD. I didn't know what you did. I didn't know anything about that. And I remember asking my advisor what it took and what it meant to have a PhD. And his words were, you need to contribute something significant to your field. And that's actually been a guiding principle throughout my career. I think about what I'm curious about and what do I think I can contribute to that area. So I went off. At that point, before I went on to graduate school, I knew that I had an interest in biology. I knew that I wanted to get a PhD because I was and still am a very independent person. I knew that the PhD gave you some autonomy, and I am very much, and at that point was very much a person that didn't like to be told what to do, so I wanted to have a job where I got to kind of guide myself and explore things that I personally was interested in. So those concepts of independence, discovery, preparation, and were important to me. I also encountered my first important mentor in my life. We're talking today about the importance of mentors, and that was the postdoc that I worked with in my first lab. And he taught me everything about doing good research, about asking good questions and setting up good experiments, but also about considering work-life balance. I mean, he had a family that he very much loved and talked, dotingly about them, and so it imprinted on me the importance of developing your career, but also the importance of those friends and family that serve as your support network along the way. Have fun, play hard, and work hard. So, and then I also was discovering at that time how much I liked presentations and doing some writing. So I went on to UW-Madison to do my graduate studies, and I really focused, of course, on my research, but then I was beginning to uncover more about things that I enjoyed doing. And those activities were outside of the lab. So, for example, I took advantage of a program that we have here called the Wisconsin Entrepreneurs Boot Camp. And I was thinking at that time that I wanted to do something outside of academia, and nobody knew anything else. I mean, I didn't have any other examples except it seemed like academia or industry. So I'm like, okay, business. I'll go into business, whatever that means. And the web program was an opportunity to kind of begin to discover what that world looked like. I also set up a mentoring program when I was a graduate student. I thought it was important to have more students of color engage early in lab research. It was important for my own experience, and I wanted others to be able to take advantage of that, because then you could begin to see other ways that you can use your science outside of kind of the pathways of going pre-med and pre-vet and all these other things. There are lots of ways that you could use your research. So I spent a lot of activity and recruited peers to join me in putting together this program. And then I took a part of a couple of other things, but I want to also highlight that I took advantage of working with someone that I had met through the web program, so the importance of networking, and she had a small consulting business practice where she was working with entrepreneurs to set up business plans. She was an MBA, and so I did some research with her, some market research work. So all of those activities were starting to take me away from the lab in terms of my own interest, but it did not mean that I didn't continue to do good work in the lab. So I had to balance those activities, but those diversity of experiences were important to me. So when it was time to graduate, I thought, okay, I needed to go out and go into business, and I can tell you all about my awful interviews that I did, because I had no idea what it meant to be a scientist transitioning into the business world and into industry. And so actually I took a position as a scientific recruiter. Why? Because I had the question of how do people make that transition? What are the positions that are out there? What is industry looking for? What are the realities of the situation? And I thought a scientific recruiter was a good position for me to kind of look globally at a variety of different scientific companies in our area and really begin to explore what they're looking for. And so I learned some really great skills out of that, especially an emphasis on networking. And because of networking, actually, I got my next position as a program manager with Center for Technology Commercialization, where I did a lot of kind of grants management, and I was starting to look at how to manage grants and money that we got from the state level and from the federal level. And then probably about a year or so into that, we had an opportunity that came up, a new seed fund program that was set up by the state and the university, and they needed someone to kind of establish that program and create a structure around that. And so that's the role that I'm in today. And I'll just briefly say that right now I work with faculty, staff, and student entrepreneurs to help them work out the business model around their innovative ideas. And I work across a variety of different industry verticals. It's not just specifically the life sciences. But we also work with some highly technical innovators that are pursuing federal funding through SBIR funding. And I can go into that a little bit later, too, if anybody is curious about that. But I'm learning a lot about the entrepreneurial landscape, what it takes to get an innovation from the lab out into the marketplace, and using some best practice tools to be able to do that. So next slide, please. So the point of my whole story is that your journey is actually not going to be a stepwise progression. Even if you're very interested in staying in academia, that process has changed too, and that may not be a stepwise. And in fact, it's a winding road. Actually, I think that that's pretty exciting. But I think that there are some good life lessons that you can take from there to help guide you along the way. Even if your journey is going to be, take you down many different paths. The first thing I say is let curiosity drive you. I have none of these jobs that I've been in, with the exception of maybe the recruiter job, has been something that I have planned, and even that was kind of not really planned. It just kind of came up. But it was all of these things came out of a drive and out of a curiosity to learn more about certain things. And I was able to seek out mentors and peers that helped me do that. So the other thing I would say is develop a network. We've talked a lot about that. Your network is important to help you solve those problems that really intrigue you. And I will say one thing about networks, and that is a network is a two-way street. So if you want to rely on somebody and hope that someone's going to help you out in the future, you don't make plans to network just when you need help. You've developed the networks over time, you develop those relationships over time, and that trust is what allows the network to be useful for you. The next thing I would say is constantly develop new skills through experiences. And what I mean by that is if you're pursuing a graduate degree, will develop great skills in writing, research, project management, mentoring, all of those things. But unfortunately, trying to translate those if you're looking outside of the academic realm is difficult. A lot of time employers, and this is what I saw as a recruiter, a lot of time employers are wanting to see those practical applications in the environments and in the context that they're used to. So if you're able to go out and do things like get internships, maybe even work with entrepreneurial startups, SBIR-funded companies that are in your area, those are some ways to get some real practical experiences and demonstrate your soft skills in those areas. The next thing is your mentor's idea of success may not be your own. Meaning that I remember as a graduate student, and I told my PI that I didn't want to pursue this, that I wanted to go into business, and that was a shunning moment. But I was dedicated and focused on getting those experiences that I thought were important. But I will say that even if someone poo-poos your idea, don't ignore the value that they offer. So my mentor was coming from a different context. She didn't go into business. She didn't understand what that world was, and so she could only offer me advice from the context that she has experienced. And what she did offer, great writing skills, great presentation skills, those are things that I value and take with me throughout my career. The last thing, take risks and do good work, and use your education to augment your interest. Don't rely on it. That means time and time again, my motto has been that PhD does not equal JOB. So you really, really, really have to, demonstrate your skills and build your networks and all that good stuff to have people see you for the unique skills that you bring to the table and not just another PhD that's in the room. And that's my talk.
Great. Thank you, Idella. We're going to do questions at the end, so we're going to go right to our next guest presenter. I'll bring your presentation up, who is Dr. Samuel Merriweather. He is the Associate Director of the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation at Texas A&M.
So howdy, everyone. I am honored to be presenting to you today. And so I want to just give a few tips for you in preparing for academic careers and developing marketable skills while you're in grad school. So the next slide just talks about what I'll talk about throughout today's webinar. I'll give you a little bit of my background, some of the strategies and tips for the academic career preparation, and then how you can continue to develop marketable skills while you're in grad school. So just a little bit about my background. I'm a native of Arkansas, and I did all of my degrees in industrial engineering. You can progress to the next slide, Liv. I did my bachelor's and master's of science at Georgia Tech, and I completed my PhD at Texas A&M University. And currently, I'm the associate director for the Texas A&M University System Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. That's a lot, and I'll give you a little bit more about what LSMP is about. But the Texas A&M University System, LSMP, it consists of 3 universities: Texas A&M University here at College Station, Texas, Prairie View A&M University, and also Texas A&M University at Corpus Christi. So with the next slide, just a little bit about what the LSMP program is about. I began in the 1990s with the National Science Foundation, and the goals are to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in the STEM fields, and we've talked about that: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And several of you may be at institutions that have LSM programs, and if so, I would encourage you to get involved with them if you're still in your undergraduate program, because it allows you to have an opportunity to have funding at the graduate level if you go to another institution that has what's called the Bridge to the Doctorate Fellowship. So that's another opportunity for you. There are over 40 alliances currently, over 600 campuses nationwide, and those include industry partners, research labs, and local, state, and federal agencies. The next slide gives you a map of the different LSMP alliances, and so you can just see where they are all across the nation, also in Hawaii, Alaska, and also Puerto Rico. So now, in terms of the strategies for academic career preparation on the next slide, these are some of my thoughts throughout my whole journey. Some of these I'm better at, and others I need to improve in them, but I just wanted to give you some of those tips. So just starting off, just think about your end goal. What are your end goals? Do you want to pursue graduate studies at the master's level, the PhD level? And if so, do you want to get involved with research, teaching, industry? I'm sure several of you are already in undergraduate research programs if you're in an REU, a research experience for undergraduates with the NSF. So you're kind of getting the flavor of what research is about. And so that's a good experience. I was actually in an NSF-sponsored REU when I was an undergraduate, and that kind of led me into going into grad school. I learned a lot about what grad school was about, what research was about, so that really influenced my decision to go on and pursue the PhD. Now, one other thing that you may want to think about as you pursue and consider grad school is there are different levels of institutions. There's very high research institutions, high research institutions, and also doctoral level research. There are institutions that really focus in on teaching primarily. So just think about what you want to do and then kind of tailor your experience and your program towards that. In terms of being strategic in your program, there are a lot of things that you can do to gain the experience. As we've already talked about, Dr. Ashanti talked about, and also Dr. Yamblin talked about the research experience that you'll need, and also Liv highlighted this as well. One thing that you probably want to do if you really enjoy research and you want to go to an academic institution where you'll be a professor and you'll conduct research yourself, is you want to get involved with research at your graduate level as early as you can, because it's important to publish and to disseminate your research. So you can be strategic. Any classwork that you do, any class assignments where you have to do a project or you have to do a research project, try to gear that towards your own research. That could be a potential paper that you have, and so that goes towards your record that Liv talked about, that you want to build up your record as a student. We're talking about mentoring, so it's very important to establish your mentoring network and also your social network. Your mentoring network can be faculty members and also peers, like Dr. Ashanti talked about near peers. So those more senior PhD students, when you're beginning in your department, seek them out. Seek them out about different mentors within a department or outside of the department. Seek them out about their own goals and careers, and if there are any similarities, you can ask them about the different things that they've experienced that may be helpful for you. And also, just a tip here, your main research advisor doesn't necessarily have to be your mentor for everything, or your main principal investigator. Seek out other mentors that may be helpful to you throughout different phases of your life. And another tip from me is stress management. You'll need that social network. Dr. Ashanti kind of talked about this too. Church was very influential for me as well in having that social network, because there'll be times where you need to just talk about things. You need to vent about things that are going on. And so just having that social network to fall back on is very important. I'd also encourage you to take advantage of any resources that are available for you as a graduate student. That can include the professional organizations in your discipline, going to those conferences, going and seeking out funds and ways to pay for conference registration and travel. Some departments have it. Sometimes you have to go to other organizations on your campus, so just seek out those resources. Professional development opportunities. I was involved with the Graduate Teaching Academy here at Texas A&M University, so that was very good. They gave me more of an emphasis of what teaching was about. I was very passionate, and I wanted to be in teaching. So that was kind of my end goal, was teaching. I really was passionate about it, so I tried to gear my experience towards that. Another opportunity I afforded myself was being an instructor of record. So I had 3 classes that I actually taught. I was the instructor, so I was responsible for all of developing the class materials, the tests, the exams, quizzes, all of that. So if you have an opportunity and you want to get into teaching, I would encourage you to be a TA, teaching assistant, or an instructor of record. Another thing here that I didn't list, but take advantage of any internships or other resources on campus. There are career centers on university campuses. Go there. And another opportunity for you, if you do want to get into teaching, is the CERTL, the Center for the Integration of Research, Teaching, and Learning. They'll help you with a lot of those soft skills that we've talked about here. So that's an opportunity for you. And Liv, if you go to the next slide, so developing marketable skills. One thing that was my bane was computer programming, but a lot of PhDs in the STEM, you'll have to do computer programming, so I just encourage you to embrace the technology. I used a lot of Python, R, which is a statistical software package, and also SIMPy. So those are open source packages, so embrace it. Learn it, get very used to using computer programming, and also any software skills and software packages and tools that can be used in the industry. So if you are not sure that you really want to be in academia, you can still pick up those different software packages and tools that you may be using in coursework in the undergraduate or in your graduate coursework as well. So those are very good skills that you can put on your CV, put on your resume as well. Another tip for me is to hone your leadership skills. That includes being involved with different student organizations. It makes you a well-rounded candidate. It teaches you different interpersonal skills, how to manage your time, so you can pick up a lot of things by being involved in different organizations. And my last tip here is to sharpen your communication skills. I use a lot of writing. I use a lot of presentations. I do a lot of presentations in my current job. So just different ways to go about that. One tip is to volunteer to give technical workshops, or if a student organization that you're involved in needs a topic delivered at their seminar or next meeting, you can volunteer to give a technical workshop if you're averse or not averse, if you're very well versed in a particular program or software. So they'll give you that experience and that practice in presenting. And in terms of writing, one tip for that is writing for graduate fellowship applications if you're still in the undergrad, or if you're in your first year or two for grad school, or even a senior PhD student. You can write for a fellowship application. So you want to get used to writing, because if you do go into academia, you'll always be writing for grants and proposals to try to get more money for you and for your research. So another tip here, again, with the coursework, it can lead to different papers that you have, and so just consider that as well. And I think that's it. So I just left my contact information. If you have any questions for me that we don't get to in the Q&A session, you can contact me.
Great. Thank you, Sam. And I'm going to turn it over to Carla to moderate the question and answer session.
Sure. Thanks to both of our presenters here, actually all of our presenters today. If you are viewing this webinar, you should see a little green thing at the top of your screen that says Viewing Liv Dietrich's Desktop. If you hover over that, there's a little icon that should say Chat. And if you click on that, you can go ahead and put your questions in that chat box. So I'm going to put a note in there just so that you can all see it. Hello. And I really encourage you guys to go ahead and drop your questions in there. I don't have any quite yet, so I'll give folks just a moment to consider to you.
I'll also say I didn't put my contact information up, but I can pass it to the organizers if anybody has any particular questions for that. And I also wanted to say, Sam, you're an Arkansan too. I am as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yep. Cool.
I do have one question, which is if you're successful in completing your graduate program, how does that benefit your ability to find a job after college? Is there an advantage to doing that graduate program?
I guess I can jump in and say that, yes, I think that there is an advantage to completing your grad program. I think, the advice is for people who are going into industry, it had been that you needed to have a PhD in order to move up, and that's not necessarily true anymore. But I will say that the PhD has opened up doors that would not have been available to me if I had only had my undergraduate degree. So if you love it, I say do it. I mean, I did it because I loved it.
I'd also just chime in terms of academia. If you want to be a professor at a very high research institution, you'll need a PhD with that. Now, some smaller institutions, you may be able to get a teaching position with a master's degree and a lot of experience. It just depends on the different institutions. So you'll need to kind of do some research on that, but there are some advantages to having an advanced degree.
And I have a question that's kind of related to that from someone else. It says, how important is it to have a postdoc position to get experience before entering industry?
So from the industry standpoint, your postdoc should be strategic, meaning if you're doing just a postdoc in academia to just have another postdoc, that's not strategic. If you're pursuing a postdoc in academia because you are focusing on something very applicable to industry, then that's important. I didn't do a traditional postdoc. I considered my time as a recruiter as my postdoc, as my advanced learning opportunity. But the best advice that I can offer is that it depends, and it depends upon what plan that you have for yourself, and be strategic about the choice of your postdoc.
Mm-hmm. Have another question about where to get your PhD. So this one says, are there advantages or disadvantages to getting your PhD abroad versus in the U.S.?
I got to say, I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I can't really speak to that either. I'm not sure about the abroad. I guess it depends on which field you're trying to get into. But I would say do a lot of research on it in your specific field.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, do you recommend getting your graduate degree from a different institution than your undergrad, or the same? So in other words, going somewhere else outside of where you went to undergrad.
I would say, I guess that would depend on your field, but in general, I've heard a couple different things. It really depends on what you want to do. If you want to get into academia, a lot of academia jobs, they want you to go somewhere else to give you a different perspective than all the treatment that you would have gotten if you were to do all of your degrees from the same institution. Now, with industry, I'm not sure that really is a big determinant about that. So it really depends on your degree. In engineering, it really is good, again, if you're in academia, to go somewhere else. It just gives you a different perspective on your discipline.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, do you recommend that you work solely towards coursework during the first couple of years of graduate studies, or are there other things that you could be doing to prepare for dissertations, et cetera?
Now, this is it's a little bit, you have to really balance it, okay? My first year, I really focused in on coursework, because we had to have a qualifying exam, and it was over roughly your first year of coursework. Now, strategically, it would have been better for me if I had also focused a little bit more on the research during my first year, couple years, because I really didn't get started in my research program until after my second year, really. And so I was kind of behind on that. And so I think if you can strategically come in with what you want to do in terms of your PhD research, it will be very helpful and very strategic for you if you were to start just small, start reading papers, start, meeting with your mentor on different topics related to your research. That would be very good for you if you can start earlier. But again, balance it with what the demands are in your department. Again, like our department, we had the qualifying exam, so you really want to focus in on doing well in those courses so you can pass the qualifying exam. So do some research, ask some of the peers ahead of you, your near peers, ask them what their experience is.
I would say, too, that this is true for every element of your graduate training. Don't do, to the best of your ability, try not to do anything in a linear fashion, right? So from my experience, you had to do research and classwork simultaneously, but the classwork load was less than the expectation for getting in the lab and being engaged in your research project. But I would say even as I was past my qualifying exams, my goals were to think about, the next step, and I was planning and networking and considering what do I do after I graduate. I would even say 2.5 years before I even graduated. So the best of your ability, try to balance things in preparation for the next level.
And I think I'll take one final question, because we're like at 4 o'clock now, but it's a good one, which is, and I guess I'll have both of you answer it. The question is, what is one piece of advice that you wish someone had told you before you entered your graduate program? Like, what's the one thing that you wish you had heard about?
Oh, it's always the one thing.
You shared so many great pieces of advice. It's hard to boil it down to one, right?
I mean, I guess for me, the one thing is that your journey isn't linear. Your journey is windy, and I struggled a lot when I made the transition to being a recruiter, and then even through subsequent steps that, you know, what if I wasn't doing the right thing? What if I'd made a mistake? What if I failed in my career and in my life because I didn't take the linear route? So it took some time to come to terms with my journey as my own.
I would say one thing for me, looking back on it, is that your main research advisor doesn't have to be your only mentor. Because my main research advisor, we clashed a lot. But then just having those other mentors to talk about different things and different aspects of my interests was very influential, was very helpful for me to get different perspectives. So that's probably what I would take.
Mm-hmm.